Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow, Des Moines Register, Tyler Tachman, Des Moines Register. After the Hawkeyes win 40-16 against the Washington Huskies. Tyler, one of the realities of post-game scrambles is you and I don't really get to talk much between the time the game ends and right now. So it's a good chance for us to listen to each other's thoughts about the win, and also for our fans and Hawkeye fans to hear what you have to say too. So let's hear what stood out about this win, a 24-point win at home a week after a 28-point loss in Columbus.
It was the most complete win that Iowa's had this season, and that's kind of been one of the themes we've been talking about is they haven't been able to put together a full game, but they were able to against Washington. I think it was probably the most impressive win of the season, taking over from that Minnesota game. But it was just from start to finish. I mean, Iowa never trailed in the game. The defense looked better. It was kind of a bend not break, and they made some really good plays to to create turnovers. Jamari Harris, Aaron Graves both had really good days in doing that, and then Kaleb Johnson again just continues to be on this stretch of really incredible play and just really carrying Iowa's offense but it was a good day in general for Iowa's offense. I mean, Cade McNamara, I'm sure there's going to be some people that still criticize his line. It wasn't anything incredible, but this is what I was probably going to need him to do the rest of the season. He didn't turn the ball over. He was, he threw 2 touchdown passes. So if the running game is going at that rate, you're not going to need him to do a lot. But I mean, we both talked about this felt like a game that this was going to be a major challenge for Iowa, that this could be perhaps with Nebraska, the 2 most difficult games for the remainder of the season. And Iowa made Washington look pretty bad. And this was a team coming off of a win against Michigan. So this was, I think, just really impressive. It inspires some optimism maybe of what Iowa can continue to do the rest of the season. But just in general, it was just a really good win for Iowa.
And it's number 200 at Iowa for Kirk Ferentz. He moves solely into number 2 all-time among Big Ten coaches in the Big Ten Conference. Amos Alonzo Stagg had 199. Kirk Ferentz now has 200. Woody Hayes is next with 205. Now, we're not going to ask, hey, can you catch him, Woody Hayes, this season? But now, Tyler, with this win, Iowa moves to 4-2. And if Iowa runs the table, he would pass Woody Hayes in that Nebraska game, and Iowa would be 10-2. That's a long way ahead here, but when you see a performance like this, it does make you think that this Iowa team has the potential to take this performance and run with it and win the next 6. I'm sure this Michigan State game is not going to be easy. Wisconsin looked great today. Nebraska that we've said is looks pretty darn good. And then, of course, you sprinkle in some other road trips in there. UCLA, Maryland, Northwestern looked good last night. So nothing's going to be easy, right? But if you were to actually put in a little time capsule, a box score from a Kirk Ferentz win, it would be this one. No turnovers. The only thing he probably wanted more of was punts. He only punted twice. Kirk would probably want 5-6 punts.
And both of them were moonshots too.
They were.
Reese Dakin launched both of them. And then because the first 2 were really good, I'm like, those are 2 great punts. And he didn't punt for the rest of the game after that. So
that's because Iowa scored, believe it or not. Get your ears ready, Hawk fans. 7 straight possessions. Iowa scored on 7 straight possessions. I have no idea. I haven't had the time to look into it, but I cannot imagine that has happened for a really, 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 really long time, in the entire Ferentz era. If someone wants to research the number of times Iowa scored on 7 straight possessions, feel free. Now, a couple of them were less than 10-yard drives, but still, they scored.
Yeah. Every time Kaleb Johnson touches the ball, it feels like he can do something special with it. And it's like he's now it's not just a 1-off or 2-off game anymore. He's really stringing them together, and it's becoming a consistent theme. And he makes it look so easy. It's actually startling how easy he makes it look. And I mean, he had basically Iowa can thank him alone for being able to get in field goal range toward the end of the first half. And that's where, things could have maybe gone awry there,
huge,
because Washington makes the field goal that was somewhat controversial. Iowa believed it wasn't good, but it was. But that's where momentum could have potentially flipped. Iowa gets the ball, maybe they just go into halftime, but then Kaleb Johnson rips off that 50-plus yard run. And if we're going to talk about the field goal, we probably should talk about Drew Stevens, who was just excellent again. And that was another phase of the game that Iowa really excelled in. And Caden Weegan as well, who had a really nice punt return to set Iowa up in good field position. So it was all three facets of the game working well. And Drew Stevens, I mean, right now, still his only missed kick of the entire season is that one against Ohio State, which I'm sure he would want to have back. But by and large, he has been very good. And the offenses, I mean, what comes to mind is that second, I believe it was the second offensive drive of the game. It was the first one that they scored a touchdown, but there was just a variety of ways that Iowa ran the ball. Caden Weegan got a carry. There was just kind of some creative motions. And I feel like that really speaks to the way Tim Lester has been able to just kind of get, it's obvious the run is coming, but to be able to get the ball in playmakers' hands in different ways and keep the defense off balance, even if they know the run is coming. So overall, I just, it was a feel good day for Iowa and particularly on offense as well.
Yeah, 37 carries for the team, 220 rushing yards. That's 5.9 per attempt. When I was saying it's like a perfect Ferentz box score, it is, because Iowa got outgained by 65 yards. Washington actually ran 80 plays to Iowa's 51. So a classic bend don't break type of thing. And I thought the defense gave up a lot, but Jamari Harris told me afterwards, other people were there too, but it was to a question of mine, which was he thought this was like one of the best passing offenses he's ever gone against, because they were obviously chucked it a lot and they had good receivers, and you could tell that they were a good passing team. They go 34 for 50 from through the air, but Iowa did a good job limiting Washington in the red zone. Obviously, Y.A. Black gets a blocked field goal. That's part of it too, but they got some stops. And how about this stat? Iowa 57 yards per punt net. Washington net punting average 6. Washington punted one time today, and it was 43-yarder that Caden Weegan picked up and returned for 37. So that's a special. Iowa completely dominated on special teams, completely dominated in the run game. I mean, Washington did get 127, but when you have Kaleb Johnson, like you've got a lot of short drives because he gets a lot of the yardage in one fell swoop. And so, 25 minutes time of possession for Iowa. Obviously, you'd love to have more, but like we said, it was like, you're not going to turn down 53-yard runs and, 33-yard pass to Dayton Howard. I just liked how Tim Lester just kind of kept his foot on the gas all day. I mean, they didn't settle. Like what I wrote in my initial thoughts was they didn't, instead of like trying to cling to this 13-point second half lead like they did against Iowa State, they kind of put their foot on the gas and pulled away. And that was really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, they made Washington look pretty bad. Like, I mean, outside of, the first little bit where Washington was kind of hanging in it, the second half was just demolition. And I think this was maybe closer to what people expected Iowa to be entering the season. It feels like maybe it took a little bit longer to get here, but because you had, particularly on defense, all those guys returning, and there's obviously going to be a learning curve and some growing pains offensively with the new offensive coordinator and Tim Lester. But this looks like the team I think we expected more that Iowa was going to look like coming into the season. And the fact that now if they can just string that together, the rest of the season, there's not a whole lot of what you would call guaranteed wins, but there's not really many guaranteed losses either. And the schedule gives Iowa a chance to run the table. I mean, even with the Iowa State, disappointment and Ohio State losing that one, there's still plenty of opportunity ahead of Iowa. And I think also just the fact that this was their response to the Ohio State game. It was an emphatic one. There was no because when you look at how they came out against Troy after that Iowa State game where they were, it was a really slow start, and you're thinking if this is their response coming out of that really tough loss to Iowa State. It's like, well, it wasn't too inspiring, but this was just basically from start to finish. Iowa had its foot on the gas and didn't really let up at all.
Sorry. Let's actually start with some. I know. So let's start with some 3-word headlines, and it'll branch us off into other topics because there's some great ones today. Great ones. And I tweeted the clubhouse leader. It's going to be the winner, but there's a lot of good ones. There was a funny one I saw on Twitter. Eating the dogs. I won't. I know it's a reference to one of the presidential debates, but that was actually pretty funny because it showed a meme as well. Dr. Stephanie Stitcox, who is my personal doctor, kenneled the Huskies. Kimba Rudd, Hawkeyes neuter Huskies. How about this one from Mr. Sarcastic Logic? KJ2 for Heisman, which I guess KJ2 is one word, and then his comment is, seriously, he'd have 3,000 yards playing against the high school teams that Gianti plays. What do you think about Caleb? I mean, Kaleb Johnson now, I think at 9, let me get the total. It's like 937 yards halfway through the season, Tyler. I mean, what do you think about that? Like being in the Heisman conversation.
I mean, at minimum, he deserves to be in the conversation. I think it might, at this point, be a stretch to say that he's at the top of the list or a front runner, but like, I don't know if there's a whole lot of other players around the nation that mean more to the team than Kaleb Johnson. Because what does Iowa's offense?
Seriously, yeah.
What does Iowa's offense do without him? I mean, he's basically and credit. I mean, he was first to credit the offensive line, which you obviously credit to them of doing their part, but he just does so much for Iowa's offense, and it's I mean, I don't think there's enough words to put into words what he means for the offense, but so he deserves to be in that conversation, especially. And I mean, he catches a touchdown today that, the run he had near the end of the first half, it reminded me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch, the way that he just was kind of just breaking tackles. And it's fun to see all the physical abilities that have been there since he arrived on campus, like, come together. I mean, he deserves all the credit he's getting. And it's been special to watch him up to this point in the season.
Yeah, he just looks like, from the press box, like, and it probably looks the same on TV, I'm guessing, but he just looks like he is like gliding through these holes, like effortlessly, And he had a really good comment after the game. He said he had been studying some Le'Veon Bell film, and of course he's a former Michigan State Spartan, so that quote might stand out this week. But just how, the former Pittsburgh Steeler, he was just so patient how he used to navigate holes, and he would wait for it to pop, and then he would hit it. I remember Le'Veon. He used to be a number 1 fantasy draft pick. So I like that. I just like hearing constantly that Kaleb Johnson is doing all the right things behind the scenes. Ferentz said that in many different ways today after the game. I mean, just how serious he has been about his craft this year. Ferentz saying, like, usually the third year is when guys really kind of get it or they don't, basically. And Kaleb Johnson definitely. I know we're on a tangent here on the 3-word headline, but I mean, it's the best tangent there is. And he scores like every one of Iowa's touchdowns, like passing or running. No, he had a pass today.
I mean, it's crazy to think that the Ohio State game was his least productive game of the season. He had 86 rushing yards and a touchdown. And like every other game, he's gone over 100 rushing yards. Every other game, he scored multiple touchdowns. So it's just a continue. And it's like you look down the rest of the schedule and it's like, who's going to stop that? Like, if he stays healthy, there's not a whole lot of reason to believe, if he keeps running like this, that those numbers are going to drop much.
Yeah, exactly. No, he's got 937. The school record is 1850 by Sean Green. So, 913 yards to go. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it would take a lot to get there, but it's possible. Just like it's crazy to think about. He started the season 3rd on the depth chart.
And he also started the season not playing the first half.
Yeah, right. This is kind of a funny one from Impetuous Hawkeye. I don't know if he had the fire Ferentz headline last week, but he says, "Don't fire Ferentz." So we've swung all the way back, everyone. We're back to not firing Ferentz this week. Hayden Hawk says, for the program. Kind of wrote that in my advance, Tyler, that this was a program statement type of spot for Iowa. And that's why I picked the Hawkeyes, even though I thought Washington looked better on paper, and you did too. It's kind of how it played out, right? This was a culture win. This was Iowa complimentary football, their best game of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I want to dive into a little bit more about Cade McNamara. And so like his final line, 8 for 14, 108 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. And again, it's not like the most, it's not a flashy line at all. But if I was going to be able to run this way the rest of the season, I wasn't going to need a ton from Cade McNamara. The baseline, absolute baseline, is for him to take care of the ball. He did that against Washington. He didn't do that against Ohio State. I mean, just to be able to manage the offense, to get Iowa, get the run game in the right spot. And, maybe he's not going to be this prolific passer that people wanted when he committed, and to be that, 200 plus yards, 250 plus yards a game. But this might be what Iowa needs from him the rest of the season, which is just to be a low mistake, steady quarterback that is going to make some of the makeable plays. And we saw, I mean, the Brendan Sullivan kind of goal line, it was almost a disastrous play where he basically threw the ball backwards. They rule his knee was down, but
Ooh, yeah, that was.
Yeah. So
didn't see him again in the
so low mistake. Really, if I was running this way, Kaleb Johnson's playing like this, the O line is playing like this in the run game. You just need a low mistake guy at quarterback, and that's what Cade McNamara wasn't against Ohio State, but that's what he was against Washington.
So a couple more headlines here. Tommy Buckets on the Ferentz. Or no, let me do Rob Milder first. And Cade was solid. That's like the best headline we've ever gotten about Cade.
Well, I mean, it's like, I think that's a compliment. Like, that's great. If
I know.
Cade is solid, like that's all Iowa needs, really.
Yeah. Tommy Bucket says another extra scoop, referencing Ferentz celebrating his 200th win with maybe a little extra ice cream this evening. That sounds really good to me too, by the way. Mocha Truck over posts again. The Hawkeyes are an over machine this year, Tyler. They are just they beat the over by themselves, I think, almost.
No, I mean, it's like big picture. The offense has been way ahead of where we expected. And that's in large part due to Kaleb Johnson. But some of the schemes that Tim Lester is cooking up, the ability to keep the defense off balance a little bit. It's just you have to be through 6 games of the Tim Lester era. Like, you have to be encouraged by what we've seen, because it's hard to imagine it being a lot better. I know the passing game could be better, but I mean, I was putting up points in a way that it did not last season.
Where I lost a good one here. Where is it? There, David Harkness, Rose Bowl revenge. Finally, after the 1982 and 1991 Rose Bowls, the Hawkeyes have exacted some revenge on the Huskies.
I can't say I remember those.
No, those are pre-Tyler existence. Yes. Let me see if there's any other good ones. I mean, the last one is which my friend Chris Brewer gave to me. Former Iowa associate SID, now works on the other side of the river with all the the big shots in the university. Said scoring is winning. And that is exactly right. I think Hawk fans can finally stop embracing this punting and this winning stuff. Now, Reese Dakin was great, but scoring is winning. That's a lot more fun to be able to like outscore an opponent and not try to just squeeze one out 13-10 or 12-10 or whatever. 15-6 against Wisconsin last year, 13-10 against Nebraska. 40 points. And as one of the DI kids asked after the game, like, you scored 40 in the opener, but you scored 40 today. This feels like a much different kind of 40, doesn't it, Tyler?
Yeah, well, it's not like Washington's defense was bad.
Right.
Like this was a pretty good defense that
Top
Kaleb
10,
that Kaleb Johnson just carved up. And again, that's why you feel good. I just feel like it just injected some much needed optimism into what the rest of the season could look like. Because if you lose this game at home, it's just there's not a whole lot that you feel great about moving forward. But now, I mean, this was a pretty much wire to wire domination against a team that just beat Michigan, and you feel better overall in a lot of different facets about what Iowa is capable of. And it shows growth, right? I know we mentioned the fact that Iowa had been up by 13 against Iowa State, and we know how that game went. This was, I mean, there was at that point on, there was little doubt really of who was in control of the game, and Iowa never let Washington really feel like they were back in it.
Dargan tells us that Kaleb Johnson is plus 20,000 on DraftKings for the Heisman. So we're not recommending that, but like put $3 on it maybe.
Yeah,
If you
I mean,
he's not going to win it, but it would be
I mean,
fun to be in the conversation.
yeah, I mean, and then that's one where there'd probably have to be some injuries elsewhere, and he'd have
Yeah.
to stay healthy. But we obviously wishing the best
Yeah.
health for everyone.
You asked Caleb about that. That was a good question by you because he had like blood
yeah,
spatter. It was like a scene from Dexter on his jersey. He had
Yeah,
blood spatters all over his jersey. But.
yeah. He said he believed it was Washington's blood, which honestly, it's not much of a surprise given the way that he runs. So, but he looked like he looked like $1 million, like he could run a race or something.
Yeah, I thought that was a good question because the wear and tear so far we're not really seeing it. It doesn't seem like he's taken significant bad. He hasn't taken like hard hits. I mean, he's usually like striding out of bounds or scoring. So,
Yeah.
um,
And
is
then,
it-
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean, you add in a flurry of Jazz Patterson, Kamari Moulton, and hopefully maybe give him a little bit of break. But if he is as sturdy as it seems he is, I think you just keep feeding him.
So a couple injuries we should get to, and then we'll talk a quick big picture thing, and then we'll go. Bo Stevens was in a boot after the game. Tyler Ellsbury stepped in at left guard and did not seem like there was really any drop-offs there. That's the value of having such a veteran, deep offensive line. So Ellsbury just seems like he's always ready to step in. So kudos to him. That's the first injury to a true starter on offense that we've seen. Don't have an update as far as how long he'll be out, but a guy in a boot, usually that's a bad sign. Probably an ankle, something like that. Xavier Wampa did leave for a little while. He was in the locker room at half, came back. Cohen Entringer played. Zach Lutmer played a lot. John Nestor played a lot. TJ Hall, he's back. So much for that. This was his 4th game, by the way. So if he plays another, he uses a year. I think he got put in for I think Deshaun Lee got benched. Is that what your read on it was?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think TJ Hall came out in the second half with the starting unit. I don't know what, if Phil Parker was just wanting to mix things up but it seems like they're still not settled at that other spot yet. Jamari Harris has been outstanding, but it still seems like Phil Parker is kind of tinkering with what exactly to do on the other side.
Yeah, defense actually is going to be a big focus on my DVR Monday. As much as offense was exciting today, I think the adjustments that Phil made on defense and after those first 2 drives were significant and helped a lot. So, go ahead.
No, I don't know. Did you mention Entringer at all? I don't.
If I did, I'd mention his last name in passing.
Well, he played a decent amount as well, and there was one play where he just like blew up a play. He like basically ran over a blocker and like made a tackle, and he's been good. And you mentioned Ellsbury, and that just him coming in reminds me of the Northwestern game last season when Logan Jones got hurt and Ellsbury came in and played center and seemed to do a really good job then. So just to have guys with experience that are able to be plugged in on the offensive line is such a luxury.
So Michigan State is 3-3 overall, 1-2 in Big Ten play, but their 2 losses are to Ohio State and Oregon. So kind of give them some grace there. They were off this week, so interesting challenge for the Hawkeyes. Now this is a team that you think Iowa's probably better than for sure, but it's a every week now. It's going to be another big week. To how does Iowa respond to insert previous week? That's going to be basically the story of the rest of the season. So now you come off a nice, big, fun win, maybe your best performance of the season. How do you follow that up? I think that's the key story for me this week because to me, Tyler, the rest of the season now for the Hawkeyes is just how well does Iowa play? Because they can be better than all 6 of these opponents that remains on the schedule.
Yeah, and I mean, I've caught a little bit of the Michigan State against Ohio State and Oregon. I wasn't overly impressed, but again, those are 2 really good teams, so they might have just been overwhelmed by a much better opponent. But I mean, the good news is Iowa has been able to go on the road, against Minnesota and have success. And I mean, the best thing you can just fall back on at this point is you have Kaleb Johnson. Like, that's just such right now. He's such a low risk, high reward option for Iowa that he's just been so steady that I just don't know if Michigan State knows exactly what's coming. I just don't know if they can stop him. And obviously, we'll dive deeper into the matchup, as the days get closer to the game. But I mean, after this performance, you feel confident, even though it's a road game. You feel confident in what Iowa is going to be able to do in East Lansing.
Good job, Tyler. I got more to write. So does Tyler. So we're going to let you guys go. But, hope you guys enjoyed this post-game podcast. Hope you enjoyed the game. We want to let you go before Ohio State, Oregon. That's going to be a doozy. Looks like Penn State, USC is in a great game right now too. So thank you all for watching, listening. For Tyler Tachman, this is Chad Leistikow saying so long from Kinnick Stadium.